What do you do when you have been working for so long to have some kind of relationship with your partner and it feels like there's nothing left that you can do? You feel exhausted and you're not happy, but at the same time, you're so exhausted that there's not even conflict really anymore. You're just basically surviving, you're not thriving. That's what we're going to talk about today. What to do in those situations, how to cope a little bit, and also excuse my head cold that I have. I'm going to be a little nasal. Anyway, my name is Michelle Pava. You're listening to the Muddy Path podcast. And so let's start with a little story, okay? Once upon a time, there was a man and a woman, and they were married. And they had a lot of conflict. Years had gone by. If you really ask them each about it, they have each been unhappy for many, many years. And maybe there were even problems from the very beginning, but in the beginning they had hope. And as time went on, they lost hope and they became exhausted. So on the surface, they might actually tell you that they are living every day fairly well. Things are calm. There's not fighting and arguing, but they are not necessarily thriving. So they're just surviving in their relationship. And that's really all they can expect right now. That's all they can expect. And both of them are fantasizing about, what if I were single? What if things were different? And they spend a lot of their time focusing on the what ifs, and also a lot of time with bitterness and anger and sadness about the past. So there's not a lot of hope. So anyway, they're sitting down and they're watching television, and she's on her chair, he's on the couch. They're kind of making comments about the show. They're watching the same show, but, it's just kind of autopilot for them. So anyway, she gets up. She says, "You want something from the kitchen?" He says, "Yes." She goes into the kitchen. She comes back. She's got the drinks or the popcorn or whatever it is that they were going to have. And she looks at him and he looks completely different. In fact, he doesn't look like a person at all anymore. She walks over, she puts the stuff down, walks over, touches him, and it's like he's got this covering around him. And there's like a little bit of movement inside underneath the covering. And she doesn't know what's happening. And she's asking him questions and he's sort of mumbling underneath, but he's saying, "I'm fine, I'm fine, I'm fine." And it feels a lot like when he has an emotional shutdown and she wants something and he's becoming emotionally distant. But what ends up happening here is that he's building a cocoon. He just doesn't want to deal anymore. And he's just going more and more inward. So he's building a cocoon. And she, as much as there's issues in the relationship, does not want him to suffer. So she sits down and they continue watching the show while he's in the cocoon. And as the hours go by, she keeps glancing over, pretending that everything's okay, and his cocoon is getting stronger and stronger. And pretty soon she can't really see him or hear him. So she decides, though, you know what? I'm in this. I'm married. I'm in this relationship. I'm committed and I'm loyal. And so she goes to sleep, hoping that tomorrow will be different. She wakes up, goes into the den, and the cocoon is still there. And she walks over and sits next to him and has coffee and puts a coffee in front of him. Of course, he doesn't drink it, but she is having a conversation with him about her day, and he is just in the cocoon. So she goes about the day. She makes sure that there's always food in front of him, talks to him, and as all of this is happening, she's starting to get more and more frustrated because she's not getting any kind of response back, and this man is wrapped up in a cocoon. And she's thinking, well, if he wants to get out of the cocoon, all he has to do is stretch, and he doesn't. And meanwhile, she's got a lot of time to think on her own. So she's got the TV on, all of his favorite shows, so that he can watch his favorite shows. But she's sort of daydreaming and looking into space and just thinking about, I was going through all of this and I wish he were different, though. I wish things were different now. And I thought things were bad before, but this is really bad. So she keeps having this feeling of, this is worse than it was before. And then she remembers, 5 years ago, I thought that was the lowest moment. But here I am. This is a lower moment. And she starts to get a little bit agitated. She feels like she's given a lot of her life to him. She's been taking care of him. And in spite of the conflicts that they've had, in spite of everything that's been going on, she just feels like she can't do this anymore. And she doesn't want to betray him. And she loves him very much, don't get me wrong. But she decides that she's going to go to the grocery store and she's going to spend a little bit more time picking out different fruits and vegetables and things that might help him, things that will get him healthier. Because she's realized that even though she's been taking care of him, that maybe she's been slacking a little bit. So, and they're very traditional, obviously, this couple, very traditional. So anyway, she goes to the grocery store and she's buying the fruits and vegetables and she's learning about cooking and she's just really immersing herself in a healthier lifestyle. And she's realizing that as she's making these recipes, as the weeks go on, she's feeling healthier as well. And by spending more time out, she's interacting with people. And because she's asking questions about health and wellness, that she's learning a lot about her own health and wellness and learning to interact with people who are generally upbeat. So she's widening her circle. So anyway, she comes back and she's making these meals and she decides that, the things that they've been watching on TV are just not that upbeat. So she decides to put on some classical music and she decides to learn how to play an instrument. She's playing the flute. She's taking lessons. All of this is happening around her husband who is in the cocoon. And she still talks to him every day, still loves him. She reminisces. She holds pictures up and hopes that he remembers who she is. And she's having all of these different emotions and she's really working hard, but at the same time, she's learning that she can't just stay at status quo. So one day, one of her new friends says, "Hey, there's going to be a drum circle. And do you want to come to the drum circle?" And she's like, "Well, I don't know. My husband's in a cocoon. I really should be here. We spend every night together." And they said, "Listen, it's only going to be a couple of hours. Come to the drum circle." So she gets excited about this and she goes through her closet and she finds some things that she used to wear and she gets dressed up and she goes to the drum circle, meets new friends, and has just a beautiful time. She feels elevated. She feels inspired. And she comes home and she walks in the door and the cocoon is gone. Her husband is gone. She's so depressed. But then days turn into weeks and she's mourning the loss of her husband. But at the same time, there's a relief that she doesn't have to take care of him anymore and that her whole life doesn't have to be wrapped up in what he's doing and what he's feeling. And she starts to just live her own life. And she starts to engage in the hobbies that she used to have. And she starts to go to therapy. And she starts to just do more and more and more. And one day, while she's missing him still very much, she hears a knock at the door and she opens the door. And when she opens the door, she can't believe it. It's her husband standing in the doorway. And he says, "I have missed you so much. I thought I lost you." And she said, "I thought I lost you." And they hug. And she realizes he looks completely transformed, and so does she. And then he tells her, "Do you know you were a cocoon?" And she said, "No, you were a cocoon." And they realized they were each a cocoon, and in that cocoon, living their truth, living an entirely different life. Because they were daydreaming so much, just sitting in space, they didn't realize that each one of them had to become who they needed to be, but yet they never left each other. We all have a little bit of that couple within us. So sometimes we shut down, sometimes we do a little too much. It's about finding that balance. And for that couple, and for many of us, we need to get into that cocoon. It doesn't mean disconnect from your partner, but it does mean find yourself. And in order to find yourself, you have to get rid of the distractions. At the same time, to nourish your partner and to support your partner is such a beautiful thing. Now think about it. If you can recall back and harken back to a time when you were supporting your partner. Maybe you were going to therapy a lot. Maybe you were purchasing things, whatever it was, spending a lot of time with them. And you look back on it now and you feel a little resentment or a lot of resentment, then you weren't really supporting them. And here's what I mean by that. When you're truly supporting someone and nourishing them only for them in a selfless way, that you're not going to gain anything from it, you're going to look at that time as not wasted. You're not going to have bitterness. And you're going to say, you know what? They're doing their thing. It was what it was supposed to be. I was supporting and nourishing them, and they're benefiting from it. So that's a beautiful thing. But if we have grudges or we feel like we should have got something in return, then we weren't ever supporting and nourishing them. And that's when relationships can really fall apart, because the other person can sense that. So if you're in a space where you need to get into that cocoon and you feel like you're dreaming and you need to heal and you're doing all the things and you're a little disconnected because you need to focus on that, that's okay, as long as you're still nourishing and supporting your partner. And I get it. Sometimes relationships don't work out and they don't work out. But now I want to just take a few seconds to talk about codependency. A lot of what you heard in that story was about codependency. Both partners lost a bit of themselves because they were focused on the other person. To honor your time, I did not give you every detail of that story, but they were a very traditional couple where the man went to work and he was the primary breadwinner. And so in that story, there was so much codependency because he was doing his thing and he felt like he was being supportive. And he was actually being codependent because he was just bebopping through life thinking that he was doing so much, and really he wasn't connecting and wasn't supporting in the way that she needed. So you have these two people who think that they're doing so much, but they're running on a hamster wheel. They're not able to connect. But when they go into that cocoon, that's where they start to find themselves and find the love for each other again. Think about that and let me know. Email me, get in contact with me. Let me know how you feel about this story. And if you feel like it struck you in a negative kind of way, did it feel a little preachy, a little touch you a little bit, ruffle the feathers? Or did it feel like an aha moment where you're like, wait, that's exactly what I need to do? Or maybe this is already what you and your partner have done. You've been listening to the Muddy Path podcast. I'm Michelle Pava, and I would love for us to stay connected. So please visit me at mymuddypath.com. Thank you so much, and please follow, subscribe, and stay connected.